All right, good evening, everyone. This is the February 1st, 2023 meeting of the Solar and Battery Storage Moratorium Study Committee. This is being broadcast by Area 58. So just to go around for the record, if we could probably shut that air conditioning off, it would be good so we could hear each other talk. Where was I? Okay, so we're going to start tonight. I'm just going to go around for the record and just announce who's here. So who's ever taking the notes from the video will know who's sitting with us tonight. So to my right, the furthest one is Mr. Connie Shea. Then we have Savory Moore, myself, Bruce Mackey. We have Roger Shores, Francis Mello, Sarah Hewins, and Steve Ward. And we're here tonight with Mr. Tom Bott, our planner.
Your valet for the evening.
So we're going to, tonight, we're only going to be here for a little less than an hour and a half. At 7 o'clock, the conservation's meeting here, so we're going to have to end it before 7 o'clock. So what we wanted to do tonight, Tom has revisions to the solar bylaw that we have discussed in prior meetings. And then from that, we were going to talk about the draft of the battery storage bylaw. And I think if we get by those two things, we'd be doing pretty well for the next less than hour and a half. Great. All right. So Jen Bogart isn't here tonight. John Gatsky wasn't able to make it, and everybody else is here. All right, Tom. I'll turn it over to you.
Alrighty. Well, we left with a cliffhanger of who's in a butter, who's a direct abutter, what is the language that we have. So Fran drew the short straw, was gracious enough to draft some of the language we had been bantering back and forth. I think I sent that out to everybody, and so I have it on the screen now. And we have at least one erstwhile citizen committee member who said, hey, you could add this to that as well, but you have to wait your turn, Savory.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not the chair, but the chair will say you have to wait your turn, I'm sure. This is the language here on the screen on page 5 of your hard copy, and shown on the screen. So the previous language is up above in red.
Tom, could I just ask you to blow that up a little bit? Sorry.
I'm going to make it larger.
Yes. Maybe one more. Thank you.
I know you got your reading glasses. So. Do what we can. So that is the language that that Fran put together for us regarding the abutters. So what do you kids think about that particular draft language?
I read it. Where do we have it? Did we get it in a handout?
It came across, we didn't get it in a handout, it came across via an email after.
I did read the email.
I didn't get that, Tom. My apologies.
That's fine. I can print some copies for this if you like, and that's fine with me.
I couldn't help with it. That's
All right.
Do you want to read it? Why don't we just read it?
Sure. Alrighty. So that language. So we are talking about for the folks who aren't keeping score at home, waiving the typical setbacks where a solar project abuts residential or agricultural zoning district.
I'm sorry, Tom. Would you mind blowing it up a little bit more?
Can do.
for Steve.
For me. Well, Steve too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Asking for a friend. I know I've done that before. So these are the setbacks. Keep in mind, the setbacks are the setbacks in commercial districts.
We still can't see it.
I'm getting to my point here, so I can.
Okay.
I'll scroll. So the setbacks are the setbacks in commercial districts, but in the residential districts, really, but those residential districts, we have proposed this change. So
Good. Thank you.
So that draft language for reducing the setbacks are direct abutters to large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations, LSGM SPI, have the option of reducing the setbacks to a minimum of 50 feet along their common border of the project in a residential agricultural RA zoning district by providing a signed affidavit that waives standard setback and screening requirements. The applicants are required contact all direct abutters affected to establish their agreement to waive the requirements. Signed affidavits must be on file with the planning board and referenced in the special permit decision.
Nice job.
Well, all I did was take what Savory had, which was basically the first part of it, and then there was a concern, who is going to notify these people? And I added, the applicants are required to contact blah, blah, blah. And then, go ahead.
Oh, no, it actually looks good, but have the option should probably be, should have the ability to apply to the planning board to, because it still would have to be approved through the planning board, so.
Have the option to apply for a waiver?
For a reduction, I think.
For a reduction.
And that way we can keep the language pretty standard.
The direct abutters have to go to planning, or does the applicant have to go with the signed waivers?
I would think the applicant, I don't think if
that's
they
what-
sign a waiver, I don't think the abutters need to show up.
Yeah, but
That's
that's
what it
what's
says
there.
here.
The applicants are
That's what it
required to
says.
contact all direct abutters. And then it would be part of the applicant's process to bring the waivers in when they come in for their permitting.
Yeah, no, the direct abutters wouldn't have to show up.
No.
So I would request to amend the language.
But then it would have to, where this planning board comes into it, is that they look at the signed affidavits, and those would be on file with the planning board and referenced in the special permit decision, which means the planning board would have to say, we have waivers that have been signed, and we're going to allow this to happen. So that would be part of the special permit decision conditions.
Right, but depending on the site plan, depending on what the specific site details are, I would think the planning board would still have to approve this reduction.
They would have to
Well, they do.
approve it and make it, put it in the order of conditions.
It's still part of the special permit. It doesn't make it automatic just because the,
Right, I just want that clarified, that
butters.
it's not automatic.
well, that's what it says, it referenced in the special permit decision.
Well, it says they have the option, okay, direct abutters have the option.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I
Because
think
if
that
they
would-
don't sign the waivers, then they
Right,
don't, then the
They
applicant.
have the option, right, okay.
And if,
Yep.
and if the abutters don't sign the waiver, the applicant doesn't get the reduction.
Right.
Well, it still should be clarified that it has to be approved through that any reduction would have to be,
How would you put that in there?
That's what it says.
I just want to make sure it's in there.
So these are sort of, just to go back to the section that we're in, so these are the dimension and dimensity requirements. So these are the setbacks that you have to do to comply. So anybody who's going to apply for something to the planning board, they have to comply with the setbacks. The only difference is in those areas, there's a reduction of a setback. So I'm not quite following you,
No.
Connie, so if you tell me specifically where you'd want to see that in there, I think essentially everything gets approved by the planning board on a large-scale ground-mounted solar. And this is just a provision for reducing the setbacks.
That's fine.
Because the planning board is going to approve the application.
That's okay. I was reading it as applicants rather than direct abutters. So the direct abutters do have the option,
Yes, absolutely.
but it's not, the applicant has the option to ask for it, but not necessarily get it granted.
Yep.
Direct abutters have the option of requesting a reduction to the setbacks?
I think that's,
Okay.
that's fine.
And Savory, you had something that you had,
I had something in the second sentence from the bottom that starts, "The applicants are required to contact all direct abutters affected to establish their agreement." That, to me, read as though you weren't given a choice.
Yeah,
That
that's a
establish their
requirement.
agreement means that this is what you're going to have to do. So I think my
Their
language,
agreement
and I do
goes
have
back to
it.
direct abutters, not the applicants.
Right.
That's right.
But I think do you have what I wrote?
Yeah, because I thought it was fine.
Yeah, I think it said something about having their willingness to establish their willingness to.
Let's see if I can find it.
Is it in the handout that we got last week?
No, I just sent it
Okay.
to, I sent it to Tom and I sent it to Fran.
All right.
yeah, I had sent this out.
I think it was, right.
So-
The applicants are required to contact all direct abutters affected to establish their willingness to enter into an agreement to waive the requirements.
And I thought that was better. I thought that was, and maybe that also addresses Connie's concerns clearer.
So the applicant's required to contact all direct abutters affected to establish, in this case, their willingness to enter into an agreement.
Yes. So that this is the applicant asking them if,
Versus
and
the applicants are required to contact all directors but to establish their agreement to waive the requirements.
I think required is a better.
I'm not taking word required out.
Okay.
What I'm doing is, it says, the original says establish an agreement as opposed to willingness to enter an agreement.
Okay.
So I think willingness puts the choice back on the abutter as opposed to making it more applicant-centric. It reinforces that the abutters have a choice.
I'm fine with that.
So we got one fine with the green language from Savory that's on the screen right now.
I'm fine with it.
Shocker.
That's two.
That looks fine to me.
Yep.
Very, okay.
Yep.
So I think we're in agreement. Let's fly with that one. And I think that clarifies, that'll clarify any future discussions about that.
Just write myself a note so I have a chance to argue it. So, were there some other things that we had discussed or that we had gone through? We had talked about, and I'm just going to go back to the top so we can scroll through them. We had talked about in the operation and maintenance plan, that the project would have, they have to submit a plan for the operation and maintenance, to include measurements to maintain safety and access, including the repair or installation of non-functioning panels. We've had a couple conversations about that.
We should establish a timeline in regards to that. Within 6 months, something along those lines.
Well, an operation and maintenance plan comes in day one. How well they follow it is the issue that most folks have. You have operation and maintenance plans for all sorts of things. And it gets back to those folks making sure they're operating by their operation and maintenance plan.
Yeah, but we should still have, we can say repair or replace non-functional panels, but there should be some sort of timeline in which to get that done. I would think 6 months is long enough for them to recognize that a tree fell on a panel, it's broken, and it should be repaired or replaced. I think that's a fairly generous timeline, but we should have it in here somewhere.
We'd like to think things will go back to normal at some point. I tried to buy a car for my wife in July. Said, I hope it's going to be here in March. It's got a battery in it. It's a plug-in hybrid.
Well, thing is that they're supposed to provide a report daily by bylaw. I mean, yearly. Yearly, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, by putting that, I mean, again, you have to be flexible. Whether they can even provide a panel in 6 months, you know, whether it can be produced or gotten to be put in 6 months, that's, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, so here we are at
that's kinda hard to police
350843
that.
annual reporting. It says the owner-operator shall submit an annual report demonstrating and certifying compliance with the operation and maintenance plan and requirements of this bylaw, and their approved site plan, including control of vegetation, maintenance of screening, adequacy of roads and access, information and maintenance completion during the course of the year, and the amount of energy generated by the facility.
Well, again, my issue is the removal of the broken panels. It's up to them if they want to replace it or not, but 6 months is a more than reasonable time to remove a broken panel. It shouldn't be sitting out there. It contains various materials such as lead solder and various glass and other issues that 6 months is more than reasonable time to get out there and unscrew a panel and remove it from the property. Because there was no establishment at the time, again, for the Route 44 one, and that's been, what, 5-6 years now, that all those burned out panels, they're useless. They're doing nothing but degrading into the environment at this point. Even if they had the replacement panels on hand, it's more important to remove broken panels than it is to replace, because it's their loss if they don't replace it. It's our loss if broken panels are sitting out there degrading into the environment.
All right, well,
And,
Pardon?
Can I say anything
Oh, you're the chair, excuse me.
for a moment?
No.
It was just something that they said at the last meeting about did somebody make a comment that when there's a panel offline or there's a panel not working, that they get a report? So if the company's getting a report that there's a panel broken and gone, don't they have knowledge of it then? So why wouldn't they, I get the point that it might take 6 months for them to get a new one, but if they don't have to report it until December that it's broken, and they have on an account, like somebody made a comment that their house panel at home, they get a report on a daily basis putting panels out. If the company's getting a report, it shouldn't take 6 or 8 or 9 months for them to say, oh, well, the town just needs their report now, so we'll just report it now. Don't they have record of that somewhere?
and what's your name, please?
My name's Mrs. Lapham on Main Street in Carver.
What-
sorry.
Go ahead.
I agree with you, but say they get their report right before Thanksgiving, we get snow, and then it creates safety issues to send somebody up there to climb up and down and
Well,
remove
then I
it, so.
understand, but you were stating, that now you have this broken panel that's just sitting there, and I get that. So if they get a report that they know on a daily basis what's working on their grid and what's not, are they gonna wait 6 months to send somebody out when they know that?
Well, that's why I want,
But-
that's why I want some sort of timeline that it's gone.
If they know that that's broken, it should wait 6 months.
I-
If the house panel gets a report, you know, somebody can push it, the guy said I can push a button and see what's working. After so long, he gets a call from the company that says, my panels are broken, can you fix it? You know,
All right.
that's all.
Okay, good. No, yeah, we get it, yeah. I mean, in most solar fields, we don't even see them. 95% or 100%. Yeah, but it just so happened that this one panel, the panel system on Route 44, you do see as you go by. I don't know.
It's not about
To
the
me, it's
visual
up to the company to fix those. I mean, they could be notified if there's a panel broken and they, I mean, what do you think, Tom? What do you,
Well, like I said, we are not going to know that a panel is inoperative,
right,
because we're looking at a field of, you know, I made up the number last time, I forget what it was, let's say 10,000 glass panels. You know, we can't tell 10,000 glass panels that one's not working.
no.
And I
you
think
can't.
for the most part, a panel that's inoperative isn't inoperative because someone broke the glass. It's inoperative because the electronics crapped out somewhere or something shorted somewhere. Considering that there's nothing hanging over them, they're in open spaces, you know, how does a panel get broken, you know, physically broken, the glass surface, outside of a hailstorm or something like that? If there's a 200-foot setback, you know, some kids throwing rocks at them and hitting them, sign them up for something because they've got an arm like you can't believe.
Right.
They're tree limbs and branches. They're you know they're cut back from them. So I think for the most part, an inoperative panel isn't going to be shattered. It's going to be shorted out somehow.
Well, the brush fire causes extremes in temperatures that can break glass, and that's, again, in Carver, a brush fire can happen any day almost.
Well, the solar panels are solid state things. And I think Tom has a point that if something's going to break it, short of a kid with a really good arm and a rock, it's going to be the electronics inside, and that's solid state stuff.
So should they or should they not be removed? It's not about seeing them out there. It's about non-functioning materials sitting out and returning back to their natural state, degrading out in the environment. And frankly, that's not something that we should allow.
I'm not an expert, but I don't know how solid state panel can degrade into the environment.
Everything degrades into the environment.
We did talk about it last week because it was John Gasky who had solar on his house, and each panel has a sensor that tells them, the company that he leases his roof to, whether or not the panel's operating. And we talked about having that technology incorporated into large scale, and then making the company owning the solar field responsible for monitoring them and replacement. So Connie's, right in the fact that we did talk about this.
That was part of the meeting I missed, I'm sure.
All right, so
Yeah.
if you got some language you just want to shoot over to
Yeah.
me, I'll plug it in.
Yes, I just, it's my concern that they just sit out there and nothing's done, and what good is that? It's an abandoned panel and it falls under, maybe it's not abandoned as an entirety, but that panel's been abandoned and should be removed.
I would just say with non-functioning,
Non-functioning.
really, whether it's broken or electronically not working. I think it'd just be any non-function.
Sitting on our ground. So that was the whole point of I'm not sure of his name, the founder.
Okay, excuse me.
Yeah, this isn't a public hearing. You said, we understand, But like I said, the panels are monitored, so they know of what's going on. Other than Route 44, there isn't any place.
Excuse me, please. You're disrupting a meeting and it's not a public hearing.
Other than Route 44, I don't know where you would see any broken panels anyway, even if the panels were broken. So I just think that this is just kind of a minor point.
Yeah, so Connie's
going
to draft something up. We'll send it in. I'll
okay.
get it out to the group
All right.
as we did
That'd be
before.
fine. But I always felt that it was up to the company to take care
Yeah,
of
it's in their best
their
interest
stuff,
to
yeah.
have to maximize their investment.
I think
So-
it's important to have that in there, that they need to be replaced when they're broken. I don't think it's important to have a 6-month, because if something's really broken, I'd like to be able to call them up and say, hey, replace that, and not have to wait 6 months before they replace it, too.
And so,
Again, that comes back
Yep.
to, I was
so
throwing out
put something together for us.
a
Send it
6-month
in.
timeline.
I'll send it out to the folks on the, so, in your reporting, we talked about stabilization, revegetation of the site, including use of pollinator species and cranberry plants, especially for dual-use installations. We haven't actually got down to the smart, the dual-use section to date. So I know that a couple people had a couple of comments about the dual use. We had changed the setback, allow the minimum setback from 25 feet, we'd increase that to 50 feet.
Yes, we did that, yep.
And somebody had an asterisk question. I'm going to go with, maybe that was Savory. Somebody had a comment about one of the particular 2 asterisks. The planning board may reduce setbacks, but in no instance shall setbacks be less than 25 feet. I guess if we're changing this to 50 feet, we should change that section there to 50 feet as well. Because right now, when we look at that, it says, these are the setbacks.
That's
200
correct.
feet,
That
100 feet.
asterisk should be 50.
So, Alright. Well, I'm gonna have to change that manual apparently, because, maybe it's over here. I don't understand why my computer doesn't want to respond. It's not a PDF. All right, so second asterisk, or first asterisk, in dual use, changed to 50-foot setbacks. And so was there anything else through the body of the large-scale solar PV bylaw that we wanted to sort of thresh out a bit more? We added the pre-construction conference. We mentioned no clearing or on-site work can happen prior to the pre-construction conference.
I have a question on that.
Yes, sir.
Is that post-approval?
Yes.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
have a question,
Yes.
if you guys were okay with it. I'd like to talk about the clear cutting of land versus dual-use solar. Based upon what the expert in hydrology said last week, I still have concerns about a clear-cut project when his expert recommendation was no more than 25%. So I think I would like to see us somehow or another address these projects that may come into a forested area and take all the trees down like they did on Great Meadow. So how would that be a suggestion for me to write up some language? Or I'd like to kind of get the committee's input as to how they feel about what he said. I think his name was Mr. Horsley.
Yeah, Scott Horsey. So what I had talked about before in the bylaws I had written in Kingston and in Falmouth both was the maximum amount of clearing of trees was 2 acres. And if you clear those 2 acres, you have to supplement with some additional plantings. And so that is language that I had used before. Keep in mind, the things that I've done before in solar were prior to the Attorney General putting their thumb more on the scale for those sort of things. So I think that's perfectly appropriate to have something in there for that. One of the reasons I put that into the bylaws that I had written was a report I saw from Mass Audubon. And Mass Audubon has said that 13 acres of forested land are lost in Massachusetts every day, a quarter of which are for solar. And a lot of those things are happening out in rural areas in western Massachusetts and things like that. I think most of the things we've seen here have been on landfills up until the time. In fact, the Cape Cod Commission recently also put the kibosh on people coming in and clear cutting those lands. In addition, the market has responded, or at least the state has, in the incentives that they provide to solar developers. Because we know solar developers are looking at maximizing the market, trying to find the cheapest land they can get, and the incentives that they have in place. So you lose points, you lose money from the state if you go and clear a site versus working on a previously prepared site. So the state has put incentives in there. In fact, I got something the other day that I haven't had a chance to look at about some changes for solar siting as well through DOER that I haven't had a chance to quite open up and take a look at. But I think that it's perfectly appropriate to include that. In fact, I think if we look at what Medway had to say in their battery energy storage, we might lean into some of those when we get to that. But I'll dress that up for you. And one of the other things that I also noticed that I thought I'd included in your packages initially was a 2015 document from DOER about solar siting and about those parameters. And I think it's a very good document that talks about glare, it talks about stormwater, it talks about chemicals and things like that. And I really thought I'd put it in there. One of the things that I included in the bylaws I'd written is I referenced that document to say anybody who's doing a solar document has to comply with the regulations proposed by DOER for solar siting in order to take, sort of have that. Because my theory is if the state makes it a policy and we tie into the state's policy, who is the Attorney General to say, you can't put that in because your bylaws got stuff about a state policy about solar siting. So once again, I think that we weigh in with those sort of things to make sure people understand what the panels are. So whether we want to talk about 2 acres, I think 2 acres is a better number than 1%, because when you start looking at 1%, some of these areas are, what's a bog? 100 acres?
Thousands.
Yeah. So you don't want 25% of thousands. You want a hard number.
Maybe,
But
but
based upon the fact that Wareham wanted to limit total projects to, I think it was either 3 or 5 acres, and the state said no.
Yep.
I'm concerned about saying 2 acres, because again, if you have a 100-acre lot, 15% of 100 acres is 15 acres. Where 2 acres of a 100-acre lot, the state may say that's not reasonable.
Yeah, but we're not limiting the size of, I think that for Wareham's, it was the size of the array.
Right.
And I think
right.
there's a petitioned article, I think just before the meeting I forwarded you the petitioned articles I received, and one of those petitioned articles was to cap a solar development at 5 acres. And I think that's one of the things that the AG is going to probably come across. So I think what Wareham was doing was not limiting the size of the cut, but limiting the size of the actual solar development.
But how do you justify that to the state if you have 100 acres and Carver's saying you can only clear cut 2?
Well, because the other 100 acres are likely suitable sites, because they're already open, because they're meadows, they're bogs, they're.
No, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm talking about you have 100 wooded acres.
Yeah.
You don't want someone to go in there and clear cut 100 acres.
They've got a 100-acre site, they can clear 2 acres for solar.
I don't think, from the state saying to Wareham, no, you can't limit a project to 3 acres or 5 acres, I don't think they're gonna allow us to limit a project to 2 acres. Because the site's so big. So I would be I'd like to put in something that we're pretty sure the state's gonna agree to, and I'm just, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we're not limiting the size of the solar array. We're limiting the
The
site that they can clear
clear
cut. So the presumption is there's other places on the site where they can put the array. And if they can't, then maybe it's not a good site.
Now, are we talking dual use?
No.
Are you saying
No.
dual use?
We're
This
talking-
is
no,
ground
We're
mounted?
talking ground mounted.
Oh, okay.
This is ground mounted.
Most everything, I just want to say, most everything that we have today is dual use.
Yep,
And,
but I'd hate
but
to
we've had
see
a,
something come in
we've had a
that we
mix,
haven't addressed.
we've had a mixture of panels on a cranberry bog. They were dual use. And then we had, I think, along with that, I think we had, there was an area of a sand pit. But those were ground mounted. And I think in order to make it square, rectangular, whatever, there was some cutting of trees too, and then those were all ground mounted. But
Oh, and
we
I have a
haven't
lot
seen
less
a-
problem with the dual use
Yeah.
because the acreage is there.
Right.
And all the things that the hydrologist talked about last week doesn't affect the cranberry bogs. I specifically asked him that, but I do have a problem with clear cutting.
Maybe the language should be something along the lines of 25%, tree clearing up to 25% of a lot with a maximum of 2 acres.
2 acres.
Something along those lines. Because I think we had a property in South Carver that was
Yeah.
13 acres that,
I was gonna say.
That's right. If they've got a 15-acre lot, I don't want them to come in and clear 13 of the 15 and keep their buffer zone and, you know,
If they had a 15-acre lot, could they split it into 5 separate lots
well, depending on.
and
the
cut 2
frontage.
acres out of
You
3?
could do it, I was just gonna say that.
but
You
if
could come in
they
with the
came and they
subdivision
wanted to
plan and-
split it into lots, wouldn't the planning board be able to say, no?
It's
No,
due
'cause
to
those are-
frontage.
It's
not
Form
the
A.
Form A lots.
Yeah.
There is
Approval not
a
required.
requirement of frontage.
So there's a way around that, and I think that the Attorney General's office would probably balk at that. And another thing to think about in 2 acres, 2 acres is not
It's not
a
big-
lot.
Yeah.
And if it's a forested area, especially in this area, not only Carver, but the southeastern Massachusetts, there are a lot of tall pine trees. And the winter sun is not going to get to these panels if it's only 2 acres of clear cut. Because there's going to be some angle, December, November, December, January, those 2 acres aren't going to get any sun at all, which is not going to make it a viable project for anyone to do. So I think that I think it's probably something that would not pass muster at the highest levels here, especially with the newfound, with the push for solar as hard as it is now.
Well, we can clearly limit it to 50% of a lot, so,
We could do that.
because that, both the expert, well, even our health, Concom officer said that that's critical. That is a critical change in the environment is 50%. So there has to be a point where it can be limited. If it reaches a critical point, we want to stop it, I would think of well before that. In my notes, I had extent of land clearing of 33%, but
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes. go ahead,
Could I
Sarah.
ask, Mr. Bott, the bylaws you worked on, the solar bylaws at 2 acres, did they pass the Attorney General's?
Yeah, but keep in mind, even though I was in Falmouth 3 years ago when I did this, that's, the AG and court cases have quickly accelerated
Right.
the changes. I
Okay.
think things that I wrote previously, the Attorney General might look at and go, no, you can't do that these days.
Yeah.
And so you're suggesting, though, that we pick a number, like 2 acres, rather than a percentage?
Well, I like sort of what Connie had to say, tree clearing up to a maximum of 25%, limited, tree clearing 25%, limited to a maximum of 2 acres, is that what you said?
I'm only throwing the 2 acres out there because that's what came up. Now, one of the big differences between Falmouth is Falmouth's aquifer is already heavily contaminated, and most of that town is on town water due to the old Air Force
But that has
base.
nothing to do with solar, it has something to do with everything to do with septic systems.
Yeah.
Right, but
Septic
land
systems.
clearing and the sole source aquifer, and the fact that everybody in this town just about is on a well system that depends on that aquifer. And when you take trees out, and it affects both how it's filtered in and how it's absorbed and cleaned into the ground, it becomes a health issue and a safety issue.
I would just like to put something reasonable in there and not have to, and have the scientific backing for it, so that the AG doesn't disapprove it. And I just don't see the AG saying okay to 2 acres, depending on the site. But a percentage, because the hydrologist said anything over 35% gets critical. Am I correct?
A hydrologist said,
Yeah,
not a hydrologist said. There are differing views
Yeah,
from
he
different
actually-
hydrologists.
I asked him what percentage of the groundwater degradation was due to solar projects, and he didn't know that number.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in my opinion, everything he said was about regular development, and I think it's all true. He used to work with us on the Plymouth Carver Aquifer Committee. But I don't think we have any,
Because
We
I
don't
don't
have
think
any-
anybody's had
well, we don't
time
have
to
any
do
good
the
data.
studies. Yeah, we don't have enough background in it.
Well, when you have development, you have pavement, you
Yeah,
have different things, you have different chemicals, you have cars, you have oil, gas, whatever. To me, a solar field, and if you look, as Savory said, if you look at the MassDOT site about solar panels, there isn't any pollution from solar
I
panels.
don't think so either.
They said that there's no pollution at solar panels. They don't have
PFAS.
PFAS and anymore. And years ago, even with the PFAS panels, they took samples of soils and they found no PFAS in them because the solar panels were sealed. And everything's sealed. And even if they're broken, there's no liquid inside of these
That's right,
things.
it's a solid state.
It's a solid
I'm not
thing.
against solar.
So,
I am against clear cutting.
Yeah.
well, but then you also have to realize that if somebody wanted, so they say, well, we don't want to do solar. So, but I mean, and maybe Savory knows more about this than I, but if you're a cranberry grower, you can clear cut as much as you want. There's no law against it.
Well, within 100 feet of your cranberry bogs.
You're right, yeah. So you can clear cut, you can excavate sand.
Up to a certain
Yeah.
There are regulations, they have to
Yeah,
follow regulations
right.
too.
But I mean, some forests can be cut down there, but you could do a subdivision and cut down.
I was just going to
You
say.
could do
That's 100% worse.
Industrial park
You bet.
and or some sort of a business area, and you can cut all those trees down. And then with the traffic and everything, the buildings and everything that go in there, it's much more. I'm not saying it's polluting, but there's a it can happen, if there was an accident or whatever.
Is pollution.
When you have a solar panel array, to me, that's about as clean as you're gonna get to put something down there. Now, I understand what the hydrologist said about, well, you're gonna clear cut the forest and you're gonna scrape the leaves away and the pine needles and you have sand. But the water still filters through the sand. There's no pollution coming from the panels. So you're just having water go into the sand, and basically that's the way septic systems are designed. You have 4 feet of material between the bottom of the septic system to the top of the water table, and that's supposed to take out any impurities. So, to me, it's a minor thing.
Well, the thing that I find that is different is if somebody comes in with a subdivision plan, we can limit the amount of tree clearing that is done and the amount of...
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. One of the things with, if a subdivision comes in, we can limit site clearing to 40%. And like we've seen with the project in South Carver that just went through Ironwood's development, that was 13 acres of land, and they're clearing 11 and a half or 12 acres of that land. Now, we wouldn't allow that on a subdivision. We're supposed to keep 6 inches caliper and 10-inch caliper and larger trees in place and make the development work around it. And we're supposed to limit the amount of clearing, grading, and soil removal in those particular instances because of the environment and the ability of the ground to filter. Even though, like you said, a lot of it does go into infiltration basins that go in, but again, that infiltration basin is forcing water that should be covering 10 acres into a couple hundred square feet, and there's very little guarantee that all that runoff from the roadways and everything else isn't filtering down directly through the sand because it has no place to break apart or be filtered out by the leaves, the pine needles, and the various.
But Connie, that's when we're talking, that's a traditional development, like Bruce said, buildings, homes, streets.
Right.
That's correct. I don't think that applies to solar.
Well, it was used as an example that if they come in for a subdivision, they can clear cut the land, but that's just not the case. We limit that. And those are the reasons we limit it. And the reasons we limit it are because we're all on the sole source aquifer, and that vegetation provides a filter.
Those are your bylaws right now, that it's 40%?
It might be up to 60% land clearing, but we're also required to justify clearing of any trees 6-inch caliber or greater in most circumstances.
And that's for residential and commercial?
For all development.
For all development. So my feeling is, based on that we can't have a separate rule for solar, a separate percentage for solar, and a different one for a building. If 60% is allowed to be clear cut for any other kind of development here, then the solar people are going to cry foul if they're only allowed 33%. It's the same trees that are being cut. So, whatever is good for one has to be good for the other. Otherwise, I think the AG is going to shoot it down as being an imbalance. So
that's what's concerning me. It's the build out of South Carver. The Federal's for sale now. With
Federal
a huge number.
furnaces?
Federal cranberries
Oh,
Yeah, that's
we just approved the solar project down there.
on their screen house. Yeah.
So that does worry me, the build out of South Carver. It's not just Makepeace.
Right, but the tree removal is a greater issue than just solar.
Yeah.
And
Oh, it is.
But-
But a development, well, 60% of the trees, you said?
yeah,
I don't know that there's a firm number. I thought only 40% of the land was to be developed, so
Do you have a number for us,
I'd have to
Tom?
go
I'll
back
drill
through
down
that.
on that for you.
Well, the gentleman that we saw on the screen up there, he said there was no difference between house lots or subdivision and solar in terms of pollution. Because I did
Right.
ask him that at the end, if you recall.
Right, and there's cars driving
Right.
over subdivisions, and there's no cars
I'm just
driving-
saying, I don't want the landowner to be pushed into a position that, well, the heck with you, I'm just gonna sell these as Form A lots.
Yeah.
Right.
That'll bankrupt the
They're-
town.
Right, well, the build-out of
Because
this town is
let me fin-
50,000 people as it is, and we're at 12,000, so expect it to increase by 40% over the next 50 years anyways. But aside from that,
I'll be 120.
allowing clear cutting for large portions of land opens that land up for future development in 20, 25 years when the solar farm comes down. And it would have been limited under subdivision plans where we're, without some sort of limitation on solar, then it's just clear cut and fully buildable. And
I'm not arguing that
No, no, I
point.
know, I'm trying to
I'm
show
arg-
what the
I'm
difference
arguing the
is.
point that the landowner is gonna say, I don't need all this. I can't do it on 2 acres. I can't do it in 3 acres. The price of cranberries just went down another 10%.
Yeah,
That's
but
a
we're not
fact.
talking about putting them on cranberry bogs.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying the mindset of the landowner. They'll just say, sell them Form A lots. And, that means for kids coming into the schools, means the fire department, means the whole basic structure of the town, if we discourage.
Well, that's happening now. That's why we want to encourage solar, isn't it? On the
Yes.
base, on the cranberry
that's right.
bogs, to keep the farmers and the agricultural going.
Right, but 2 acres clear cut with the shade trees on the perimeter
It's not gonna
probably
give you
breaks down to an acre or less.
Right, we have to make solar appetizing to the property owners as opposed to residential development.
But see, the problem is that these solar panels, once they're clear cut and the solar panels are put on, 25 years from now, are they going to replace them with solar panels, or are they going to come in and put in subdivisions? Because the land's
don't know.
already been cleared of all trees, and that's something that we should be thinking about for the long-term issues.
I
involved
am
in
thinking
this.
long-term.
But if we make it difficult for them to put in solar now, then they'll just put in the residential now and not 25 years from now.
And they need the money,
I would
trust
think
me.
that these solar fields are going to be for a longer time than 25 years.
Well,
I mean,
currently-
because that's what we're trying to
I don't
develop
understand
that.
why the cranberry, and I'm gonna be honest, the cranberry owners have the bogs. The bogs are dual use. It makes perfect sense that that's where we should be encouraging solar. As opposed to clear-cutting land that right now is forested.
I'm not debating that. The only thing I'm debating is if they can't do it on their Form A lots, we're looking at trouble in the town financially.
I don't see that happening right now.
Oh, I do.
I see the solar projects being more attracted to the cranberry bogs than to coming in and clear cutting, because it costs a lot of money to do that, number one. And I agree with Connie. I think some of these projects that are clear-cut projects, you're gonna find out down the road, are going to be used for something other than solar. And 20 years is not a long time.
But they could be used today for the same thing, not solar. They could be clear cut tomorrow
That's
Yeah, but
for
there's
something different.
lots of incentives today. So, commercial, a business comes in, they get the money from the state today, and 20 years for a business is a short time frame. They get the money today, they have the land, and then 20 years from now, they do something else with it.
Right, because if you
Incentives
came
aren't
in with a
quite enough.
subdivision now, for instance, the 12 acres out of the 13-acre property in South Carver that was cleared, that I would be very surprised indeed if the planning board allowed them to clear 12 acres and just leave a little ring of trees around it. It wouldn't be in the best interest of the town to develop in that manner.
All right, Steve, I mean,
just wanted
we've
to
only
make-
got so much time here, so we just can't get stuck on one thing. Maybe we should think about this for a while, but go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that the incentives aren't there to make me want to put solar on my bog yet, Fran. So they'd have to increase quite a bit. It adds awful lot of work to grow cranberries. And I'm with you, I'd rather not do the trees, cut down trees, but it's hard for me to say to, Roger, you can't cut down trees. He's owned the property, he's invested in it. It's kind of his, trying to walk a fine line on where his rights are to cut down those trees. And I think, another point that you made is maybe we ought to be looking at a stormwater runoff plan that goes along with a lot of these things.
We
So,
do.
yeah.
That's considered. Fuss and O'Neill, consulting engineers, whenever we do a solar project, they look at the stormwater runoff. So, I mean, that's another thing I was thinking about when the hydrologist was talking about this stuff. It's looked at by Fuss and O'Neill.
When I'm talking about commercial incentives and big business, I'm not talking about the landowners here
No,
today.
I understand.
Or the cranberry growers. I'm talking about the big solar companies who see an upside to our community because we may be in trouble with the cranberries. And to come in here and change the nature of our community because they've got big money behind them.
And I know, speaking for Roger too, that we think exactly that same way. We want to keep the community looking nice, but at the same time, we're trying to make sure that we create opportunities for other growers.
For the
yeah,
landowners.
yeah.
Yep.
Again, according to the health agent, there has to be a reasonable point of land clearing. Even our Concom agent said 50% was over the critical point. So there has to be a point at which it's reasonable.
But if it's 50% for solar, it has to be 50% for all other development. Because
See,
it's
I
the
don't
same
have a
thing.
problem with
Yeah,
that either.
So I think that
But we're
this
talking about
becomes,
solar, and
I
we're
know.
trying to establish here and now what is appropriate, and if it's appropriate for solar, we can carry it on to the other projects because we have the facts and the basis for it.
do solar bylaws have to follow other zoning bylaws that are already in effect that aren't solar specific?
Well, that's another issue I want to bring up too, is some of the requirements for application should meet the standards of subdivision bylaws that talk about water infiltration, drainage, identifying wetlands, and none of that is in here. And those are just basic things.
Isn't that part of site plan review?
It's part of site plan review, yeah.
Well, then,
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be necessarily incorporated into this specific bylaw.
I see that point, yeah.
If
Yeah,
it's,
so-
yeah, if it's in site plan review, that has to be.
So if
done
there is a
anyway.
60% maximum of tree clearing or clearing of any land for any use, then that should in fact take care of the solar as well.
Yes, but we've already heard testimony that 60% is beyond what's critical in maintaining.
Then you need to change the
Yes.
solar law.
So let's-
I mean, the zoning law, not the
So
solar law.
let's start here and we got
So-
something to work off
So,
of.
Mr. Chair, can we ask Mr. Bott if he
Yes.
can look up and tell us what that road percentage is? So we know what we're talking about, whether
Yes.
it's 40, 50, 60? 'Cause I don't
Already on
think
my
any
list.
of
How
us-
much clearing can you do for a subdivision or commercial development?
Yeah. Thank you.
And then we kind of get, you have other changes
Say, will you allow this here?
that you've made too. We probably should move along. We can
So
look
we're
at
adding
that.
Savory's language,
Evidence
changing the
that says
asterisk to 50 feet
that
for
this
dual
is
use,
detrimental
tree clearing of
to the
25% more limited to a max of 25 acres likely in
I'll
the
go that all the way.
the clearing
I
process.
fully understand what you're saying.
Adding the panel maintenance discussion to to section 34 under panel maintenance are the notes I have from tonight,
Okay.
those sort of things.
I mean, all I can say is that most of our solar projects, we haven't had large-scale clearing. There's been a few, but I'd say 75% of them have been over cranberry bogs and sand pits.
Excellent.
So it hasn't been a huge concern. It's not something that I panic about.
But we're addressing the bylaw now.
yeah.
So why wouldn't we address it?
Sure, okay,
Because it is a concern
yeah,
that it doesn't happen on a regular basis.
okay. Well, I think what Savory brought up, if the limited clearing for other projects is limited to a certain percentage, maybe we should shoot for that. And then it would make everybody happy, hopefully. I'm not sure, but
So
You can never make everyone
do
happy.
we want to toggle over and just introduce the better energy storage bylaw that
Yes.
Yeah.
okay, well, you know, there's a couple other things that I'll do that, but there was one other thing that we should put somewhere in the bylaw, and I really haven't looked at it closely, but I think that it's important that the screening goes up first during the construction.
We
of a
talked about those
solar
early
field.
days.
Solar field, yeah. I mean, these are on our list of things to look at. Most of them I have answers for. I don't know if it's going to make everybody happy, but I do have answers for them. But
Can you put the screening up first if
Well-
you're working in a site?
When possible. When possible. You know, I mean, you can't throw a blanket over everything and say that this is the way you have to do it, because sometimes you can't do it that way because of topography, wherever the project's going to be. But it would certainly help, because I know, like on all projects, once they're being constructed, you know, you have so many complaints coming to the planner and to the building inspector, and if these things could be screened first, or at least, you know, cleaned up on the outside, screened first, then that would help with the appearance of the project as it's going in. And then, if we could take a look, I know that Jen had some concerns about the driveways, and I think this is where the Carver landfill is, down in that area, down in South Carver, where we put in, I think it was on Makepeace property, where there's solar panel fields off the road. There's a long straight driveway. You could see some of the panels if you look down the driveway. I mean, that type of thing, you wouldn't be able to see those panels if you put like a curve in the driveway, or put some bushes at the gate or something like that, and that would eliminate, although I think it's minor in my mind, but to other people, it doesn't look right. But
I think that opens up a can of worms.
what's
If
that?
if we start regulating what's visible from a public way, it
Well,
becomes
in lots of
subjective.
places, we regulate what can be seen from a public way.
I know, but it becomes subjective. And, you know, the solar panels that are on Mayflower Road, not on Cranberry Road, that were just built, you can see from Tremont Street. They're 3/4 of a mile away, but you can see them. Does that mean that now you have to put screening all along Tremont, so you can't look across acres and acres of cranberries to see them? I just think it becomes,
It's required to be
Shaped.
screened from public ways. Whether, I'm not sure when this project,
It
was
was,
approved, but-
it was,
but it was still within the, if it's more than the 800 feet, it does not.
yeah, 600 or 800
we're
feet.
allowed to reduce the required screening in those cases, but screening is required, a minimum of 50%, I believe.
I think if there's a certain distance from a butters, that you don't have to do anything.
So
I think it
to,
was 600 feet.
so
yeah.
to Bruce's question, the statement was,
If
there should be
possible.
essentially, there should be curves in driveways
If
in order
possible.
to maintain screening from
Minimum,
the
yeah,
entrance.
viewing of the solar project, that's all, if possible, you know.
The curved driveway is the best.
Yeah, it takes away, I mean, they do that in subdivisions, do it a lot of things, they put curves in a road, and that way there, you wouldn't see the project. It might not be able to happen in every instance, but in some instances, you could do it that way. It was just a thought.
No, it make it look like a little country road rather than.
Right,
I
right,
fully
right. I
understand.
mean, you know, these are thoughts that the planning board can consider. I mean, the only reason I bring this up, because I've been in the business for a while, and it wouldn't occur to a lot of other people, unless you had been in the business. But that's one way that the planning board can deal with these things.
And one quick one is they should be, large scale or small scale should have some amount of screening from abutter properties. I mean, if I'm gonna put it in my backyard, there's no requirement for me to screen it from my neighbors because it's a small scale one. And in the afternoon, the glare could be right in their windows. So we should prohibit the glare on abutting residences or public ways. I wouldn't, a car come, because there's no regulations in regards to some of these any of these small scale ones. It says
Well,
it's allowed by right, and they're not subject to the rest of the laws.
I mean, that's something that isn't in the bylaws right now.
Well,
but
that's
it's
what I'm
all-
just saying is that's just something that's small. No glare on residents or public way at any time from any solar installation, and all solar installations must provide minimum of 50% screening from abutting properties, because if I put it in my backyard, and it's not a big one, I could put it within, I think it's 20 feet of the property line or 15 feet of the property line.
Well, I think that's the whole nother subject.
Yeah, so right now the bylaw, large-scale solar says smaller scale ground or building-mounted solar electric installations, which are accessory structure to an existing residential, non-residential use, do not need to comply with this section, but must comply with other provisions of the Carver zoning bylaw. So what we're dealing with is large scale, and so you're saying
That we're completely ignoring. If I want to put it in my backyard, and my only requirement is that I have to keep it 15 feet off my property line,
Well, it says you have to provide with other provisions of the Carver zoning bylaws.
and the Carver zoning bylaws says I can't put a structure within 15 feet of my property line. So I can build a small-scale solar right up to my 15 feet, and there's no requirement for
so
screening.
just to keep us
and
on task, we're large scale.
Yeah.
So that if we want to do that, we probably should add that to the list for next year or for the
Okay.
fall.
Yeah,
That's fine.
that's what I would do.
We're
Yeah,
just
'cause
too
we're going
late
off
to
into
be
too many things.
introducing new
Yeah.
things
That's
to the
fine.
warrant at this point.
All right, if you want to go into the battery storage, Tom, it's 6:45, so we probably have 5 or 10 minutes maybe.
Yeah, so let's just do an introduction. So what I did, what you've got is, and if you don't have copies of it, I brought some hard copies with me as well. I think I might have made 6 of them or so. So if you need one, take one, and send those over. So this is based on Medway's bylaw. We had talked about Medway's before, and as I said, to their credit, Medway spent a lot of time and a lot of money on this, and we've been sort of poaching their stuff to look at what they had done. So Medway has a specific bylaw, which is what you've got there in your hands, and they also created a specific zoning district. There you go. That specific zoning district is, in their case, is on the edge of town, and it's located near power lines. Montague, which is a town that town council had recommended to us or mentioned to us early on, added solar as an existing use in the industrial, in their industrial zoning bylaw. And they allow those in the existing districts. So one of the things that really we need to get a hand on is the battery storage bylaw has 2 tiers in it in Medway. Tier 1, which has an aggregate capacity of less than 1 megawatt hour. And those are permitted in all zoning districts. And I'm going to get you a picture of what that is in just a second, and what you've actually seen one in the handout that you had earlier. Tier 2 are those that are over 1 megawatt hour. And those are the things that require a special permit by the planning board. And in the case of Medway, they are permitted only in their energy resource zoning district. And their energy resource zoning district is an industrial district that they had before in their industrial 2 district, which they renamed for this solar. These refer to developments that are over 1 megawatt hour. So what's a 1 megawatt hour look like? Let's see if this works out here.
That's the big one on the tractor trailer size.
Yeah, so this is, as you see on the screen here, that is a 1 megawatt hour container. It's 20 feet long, it's 8 feet wide, it's 8.5 feet high. So it's a small shipping container. So that's the maximum size of a 1 megawatt. And this is based on just some initial research that I did, just for comparison's sake. So to step back from that, things that are under that, and these are things that might be on a business, that a business decides they want to have storage for their business, for something to that effect, to make sure that they've got energy in case the power goes down, for sort of in the absence, in the substitution of a generator. Some might decide, I'm not going to have a diesel generator I'm going to go ahead and do battery storage on my site. So I know what I've got and I know how regularly I have it. So that would be the use for this. This would not be a standalone sort of thing. This would be something typically on someone's property. So we look at what's smaller than that. Well, the next size down is a 0.5 megawatt hour. And that container's essentially a 10 by 8 by 5.5. So
Size of a shed.
to get smaller than that, this is 100 to 200 kilowatt hour, and they call it a cabinet rather than a container at that point. And so this one is 8.5 foot, 8.9 foot wide, 6.6 foot deep, and 8.3 foot high. And then the next size down from that is a 60 megawatt hour cabinet, which is thank you. It's a kilowatt hour cabinet, 7.9 feet wide, 3.6 feet deep, and 8 feet high. So essentially, anything that's smaller than a 20-foot shipping container for battery storage would be allowed in all the districts. It
So-
wouldn't be subject to the bylaw.
Every house could have one of these parked in there?
So when we get to houses, these are for medium to commercial size. What goes in a house is typically your Tesla battery, which is about 1.3 kilowatts.
Right,
Not,
13, but yeah.
So these are things that are, and I have some pictures of those as well. They're essentially an appliance in your house. They're smaller than a refrigerator, and they are not subject to the bylaw. They're essentially an appliance at your house. There are fire codes, there are electrical codes for those. Someone can today put a battery storage, a battery in their house, and it's allowed under the building code, provided it follows fire code. So those are appliances. We're not going to be the battery police for everybody's house. It's your house. You get to put one of these things in your house, provided it meets the fire and the electrical code. So the provisions of a battery storage system are these things that are essentially along this size that we're talking about, that would go on a more of a commercial site. First off, these things are expensive, so you would not need one for your house. I've seen some good-sized houses in Carver, but I can't imagine anybody needing something to that effect. So an appliance is an appliance, not subject to the bylaw. If you're putting something essentially outside in your parking lot of your business, then you basically start to look at, where is that site? So if the planning board was doing a site plan for a new business and someone wanted to have this on their property, they'd show it on the site plan, where it's out in the parking lot, much like you would for a dumpster or something like that, because they're a comparable size. 10 by 10 by 10, a 10-foot cube is essentially about the size of a dumpster. And so maybe Shaw's might say, oh, we want to have a 1 megawatt container to, so our food doesn't go bad if the power goes down or something like that. But you'd have to have a pretty significant size operation to both have the need for it and have the money for it to put one of these things in.
Could I have a copy of that?
Sure. So back to the bylaw. So the bylaw from Medway gets into those basic things we talked about. It gets into this Tier 1 and Tier 2 in Section 2 that we had just did the graphic for you. And these are the setbacks that are in the Medway bylaw, and of course this is the thing that's going to be, it's always the thing that people lean on the most on. So those are the setbacks in the Medway bylaw for Tier 2. Once again, Tier 1, those smaller things are going to be in the parking lot. They're not subject to those sort of setbacks. But the setbacks for something like this, 50 feet on all sides, unless it's in abuts a residential area, then it's 100 foot on each side. So 100 foot from the side, rear, across the street from residential zoning, existing zoning, two-family or multi-family structures. In addition, 10 feet have to be made between those best components and all other buildings, and this is a fire code thing to make sure there's no materials out there that could be that could combust as a product of being too close to the machine itself. And so a lot of things that are in here are some of the things we sort of talked about before. In the Medway bylaw, they had talked about land clearing as well. Let's see.
Again, I think the land clearing has to be in sync with whatever else is, for solar and for
Yeah.
any other kind of.
Well, and the good news is that the AG hasn't put their thumb on batteries yet, so let's put something in place today before they get to that point. I totally lost my train of thought. What was I looking for?
I thought it was the land clearing. There was something.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. Mitigation for carbon loss equation, mitigation for disruption of historic resources, mitigation for disruption of trail networks, mitigation for loss of carbon sequestration in forest habitat. So this is very interesting and something we might lean into when we're looking at forest clearing issues here. Vegetation clearing and tree cutting. Areas within 10 feet have to be cleared from combustible materials from the battery storage facility. Single specimens of trees, shrubberies, and cultivated ground such as green grass, ivy, succulents, and similar plants used for ground covers can be permitted as long as they don't transmit fire. Removal of trees should be minimized to the extent possible. And that's sort of standard language for a lot of things, the things that we have in ours, to the minimum extent possible. So we'd like to operationalize that by giving it the numbers we talked about there, but I think there may be some things we might lean into from Medway stuff that we might look at incorporating into some of our solar goodies.
Yeah.
I will get to you that document that I had talked about before with what DOER had put together as far as siting requirements, so you'll have that for our next meeting as
You
well.
said that was from 2015?
From 2015.
So that's 8 years old now.
Yeah, and I referenced it, and I looked to see if they've updated it, and haven't to date. So like I said, it's been included in all the bylaws that I've written, and I kind of surprised when I went through the book, when Bruce and I were talking about this the other day, that I had missed it for some reason. So I'll include that for you as well. We hear voices in the hallway. We got a meeting back here in a week. Hopefully, nobody else is meeting in the room.
So it'll be February
We're not.
8th. February 8th.
February
We'll meet
8th.
again. at
And
our
we will,
next
and we will
meeting.
make sure we chat with our partners at Area 58 to make sure that we're clear on, room is aware, they're great partners at our last meeting. They came down to apologize for not being able to get to the planning board meeting because they were up here at the same time we were at the planning board meeting, so the select board ran long.
February 8th, right?
February 8th will be our next meeting
5:30?
at 5:30.
Yep.
All right, I'm not sure what room. It'll be up here if possible. I prefer this,
Yeah,
but.
we haven't posted it yet, so
Okay.
we like being up here. It's easier for our
Okay.
friends at Area 58 to deal with those sort of things. You've got copies of the petition bylaws in your inbox. I sent them out just before the meeting, so you know what else is on the table. And that's what we got for tonight.
All right, thank you. Motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, good night, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you.